2,000 years ago, the most powerful man on earth sat down and wrote a private note to himself. He wasn't writing for you. He wasn't writing for history. He was writing because he was struggling. A plague was moving through his empire, killing his people by the thousands. He had buried most of his children. A general he trusted had just declared himself emperor. And in that notebook, the one we now call the Meditations, Marcus Aurelius kept circling back to the same four words. Not strategies, not tactics. Four virtues. Wisdom, courage, justice, temperance. He believed that if you had those four, nothing could actually take anything from you. Not loss, not failure, not other people. In the next 12 minutes, what each one means, where people get it wrong, and how to practice it today. First, the short origin story, because it matters. Around 300 BCE, a merchant named Zeno lost everything in a shipwreck, wandered into an Athens bookshop, started reading about Socrates, and never went home. He began teaching on a public porch at the edge of the marketplace. The Greek word for that porch is stoa. That's the entire reason we call it Stoicism. Zeno didn't invent the four virtues. Plato had already named them. What the Stoics added was a sharper claim. Virtue is the only true good. Everything else, health, money, reputation, they called indifference. Worth pursuing, but not the thing your life is made of. Here's the useful part. The four virtues aren't a personality test. They're four questions you ask in a hard moment, one at a time. Virtue number 1, wisdom. The Stoics used 2 words for it, and the difference is everything. Sophia is theoretical knowledge. Phronesis is practical wisdom, seeing a situation clearly and choosing well inside it. Stoicism cares almost entirely about the second one, so wisdom is not your IQ. A person can know an enormous amount and still be catastrophically bad at living. Wisdom is seeing what's actually in front of you, stripping away the story you've layered on it, and picking the next right move. Epictetus put it in one line. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of things. He would know. Epictetus was born enslaved and crippled, most likely by an owner. He later taught the most powerful young men in Rome. The core of his teaching was one distinction, the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to you, your judgments, your intentions, your effort, and some things are not. Other people's behavior, the past, your body's limits, the outcome of anything. Your boss sends a message that just says, "Can we talk later?" 6 words, that's the event. Everything after that is you, the knot in your stomach, the rehearsed defense, the 4 hours spent scanning last month for the mistake. None of that came from the message. It came from the story you attached to it. The practice is simple, and it is hard. Write down what literally happened in one sentence, only facts a camera could record. Then write down what you added. Then ask, given only what's actually true, what's the next right action? 9 times out of 10, the answer is smaller and calmer than the panic. Virtue number 2, courage. Andrea. We hear that word and picture a battlefield. The Stoics meant something much wider, and far more relevant to a life where nobody is charging at you with a spear. Courage in Stoicism has 3 faces. The first is the obvious one, doing the thing you're afraid of. Notice the Stoics never claimed you'd stop being afraid. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting well while afraid. The second face is endurance. Not the sprint into danger, but the unglamorous ability to keep going through something that just keeps going. Chronic illness, a hard year, grief with no finish line. Seneca called endurance the harder bravery precisely because nobody applauds it. The third face is the one people forget. Honesty, saying the true thing in a room that doesn't want to hear it, admitting you were wrong in public. That costs more than most physical risks. The Stoics had a specific technique for fear, and it's counterintuitive. Premeditatio malorum. the premeditation of evils. Instead of avoiding the worst case, you walk into it, in detail, on purpose. What exactly happens if I lose this client? Then what? Most fears are vague, and vague fears are enormous. Follow one to the end, and it usually resolves into something survivable, with an action attached. Seneca's line is the whole point. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And then there's Marcus, writing to himself in a war camp. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That is not a motivational poster. It's a claim about where virtue gets built. You cannot practice courage in a life with nothing hard in it. The obstacle isn't interrupting your character development. It is the development. The practice. Pick the thing you've been avoiding for more than a week. The call, the invoice, the appointment. Give it 10 minutes today. Not the whole thing. 10 minutes. Courage responds to volume, not intensity. Virtue number 3, justice. Dikaiosine. And this is the one modern self-improvement quietly deletes. Scroll through most Stoicism content online, and you'll find a philosophy of personal armor. Detach. Don't let anything touch you. That is not Stoicism. It's a misreading so common it has its own name, confusing lowercase s Stoic, meaning emotionally flat, with capital S Stoic, the philosophy. The actual Stoics were relentlessly, almost annoyingly social. The entire point of self-mastery was so you could show up for other people properly. Marcus wrote it plainly. We were born for cooperation, like the feet, like the hands. And elsewhere, even more directly, what injures the hive injures the bee. So what does justice actually ask of you? 3 things. Fairness, giving people what they're actually owed, your attention, credit for their work, the benefit of the doubt. Kindness, and the Stoics were specific. Kindness that doesn't depend on the other person deserving it, because the moment it depends on their behavior, you've handed them control of your character. And contribution, doing the work in front of you as your share of something bigger. Marcus, who could have had anything, kept reminding himself his job was to do the work of a human being. Here's the sharpest test I know. Would I still do this if no one would ever find out? Justice is the virtue that operates when there's no audience. The receipt you correct when the total came out in your favor. The credit you give the quiet person in the meeting who actually had the idea. Virtue number 4, temperance. Sophrosne, self-control. Or better, right measure. Temperance has the worst branding of the 4. It sounds like deprivation, cold rooms, plain food, saying no to everything. That's not it. Seneca was extraordinarily wealthy and never pretended otherwise. Temperance isn't the absence of pleasure. It's enjoying something without needing it. That distinction is the whole virtue. Can you have the drink and also skip the drink? Can you check the phone and also leave it in another room for 3 hours? If the answer is no, you don't own it. It owns you. And this is the virtue our century is hardest on. Every screen you look at was designed by people whose job was to defeat your self-control. That's not a metaphor. That's the business model. Temperance isn't a quaint, ancient virtue anymore. It's the load-bearing one. The Stoic mechanic here is the pause. Epictetus taught that between an impression and your response there's a gap, and in that gap, you're free. Something happens. You feel the pull. Instead of acting, you say, wait. The pull isn't the problem. Acting on it automatically is. Seneca trained for this directly. A few days each month living deliberately poor, plain food and a hard bed. Then asking, is this the condition I so feared? The modern version. 1 voluntary discomfort a week. Cold shower, skip a meal, a day with no screens, and a 10-minute delay on any impulse purchase or angry message. Most impulses don't survive 10 minutes. So how do you turn 4 Greek words into a life? The morning, 2 minutes before the day starts. What is likely to be hard today? Who am I likely to be difficult with? Marcus opened one of the most famous passages in the Meditations by telling himself he'd meet ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest people that day, and that none of it could harm him. That's rehearsal, not pessimism. Then the 4 questions. Run them on whatever the day is holding. Where do I need to see clearly instead of react? That's wisdom. What am I avoiding? That's courage. Who needs something from me? That's justice. What's pulling me around? That's temperance. The evening. Seneca borrowed this from his teacher Sextius. 3 questions asked without cruelty. What did I do badly? What did I do well? What could I do better tomorrow? Notice the middle one. Most self-reviews only ask the first. The Stoic version makes you name what you got right, because the goal isn't guilt, it's accuracy. Do those 2 bookends for 30 days and something shifts. You stop asking whether you're a good person, an unanswerable question, and start asking whether that action was wise, brave, fair, and measured, which you can answer hundreds of times a day. Marcus, again, cutting straight to it. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Here's the part I find genuinely comforting. Marcus Aurelius wrote those notes for roughly a decade. He never finished. He kept telling himself the same things. Be fair. Don't waste the day. Stop being angry. Because he kept failing at them. The most quoted book on self-mastery in history is the private notebook of a man who had to keep starting again. That's the offer. Not that you become unshakable in a week, that you get 4 reliable questions to bring to a hard moment for the rest of your life. Wisdom, courage, justice, temperance. Pick the one you're weakest at and practice that one this week.